G'day legends, I hope that you're doing really well. Now, today is the 25th of April. This is Anzac Day in Australia. Now, Anzac is Australia, New Zealand Army Corps. Now, this day is to commemorate World War I soldiers and those that paid their lives, but it also really commemorates all servicemen who have served and given the ultimate sacrifice. So, if this day starts with a dawn service, this is at the time that the lads would have landed on the beach in Gallipoli, and it's a national public holiday. And to be honest, I think it's actually the best day of the year. So today is very special, and the dawn services are always fantastic, very, tear-jerking, but also very special for all that go, and I think everyone really should go. Today does mean something different to everyone, but for me, it commemorates all soldiers, Australian and abroad, who have fought for freedom, and those that fought for their nation, especially those who were conscripted to go to war that the politicians jumped into. Australians are incredibly lucky, and that is because those men gave their tomorrow for our today. So that's just a quick thing of what today is.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
They shall grow not old, as we that are let grow old. Age shall not bury them, the going down of the sun, and in the morning we will remember them.
We will remember them.
But let's have a look at the maps, and we'll talk about a few things, the weather, the offensives, and lots of that sort of stuff. So, of course, we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied by Russia since 22, and the purple since 2014. And the green, which is areas liberated by Ukraine that were occupied by the Russian forces throughout the war. And, of course, we have Donetsk here, and Crimea here. We've got Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Kiev in the middle. And we're going to jump down into where everyone really is talking about, into Bakhmut, as this will come into more effect as we talk about this in the future. So today is the 25th. The map was updated a few hours back because I went out for breakfast and actually lunch today. So let's roll back to the 24th. And what did we see? Nothing really. And let's look a day in the future. Nothing again. So we're going to talk about why there may not be too many updates, and we'll get into that in a sec. But as always, let's compare this to, we've actually got a Wagner group map today. So of course, this one is very biased towards the Russian side, but as these other maps can be biased towards the Ukrainian side. But what does it actually show? So through here by this train is the train line and the Bakhmutka River here. So let's have a look at what we're seeing on this. So train line here, Bakhmutka River here. Is it too much different? Not really. It is fairly similar. So this yellow road here where it splits, this is this yellow road here. So it is showing fairly similar, but something that this map does show is it shows the lighter red is area, the Russian control, and the dark red is area within the city centre of the Russian control, and the dark red is outside the city. So you can just see if this map is correct. And even if we were say it's down here somewhere, the front line, it just shows how little of Bakhmut is actually under control of the Ukrainian forces at this point. Now, it is wrong to say that Bakhmut is under control of any side. This area is heavily, heavily contested. But to say it's holding on either is wrong. But Ukraine only have this part here, or even on this map, this bit here. So we can see that this one, and what we'll take as a reference point, as always, is this reservoir here. This is this reservoir here. So it is showing fairly similar. So this reservoir, it bubbles out here. And to be honest, is it showing too much different? Like, of course, the Wagner is showing more controlled map area, but not radically different. So let's actually then zoom in on Bakhmut on the ISW map as well. So let's jump in here. Now on the ISW, of course, yellow is claimed Russian control, so what the Russians have got, and red is what they've actually been assessed to have. And as you can see, that Bakhmut is all the way around here, and this is the area here. Now, if you ask me, the claimed Russian control is very similar to what Wagner are saying they actually control. So, yeah, I guess they're going off just what they're claiming is what they hold on this map, and if that makes sense across. So they are fairly similar, and this region here is heavily contested, and it could potentially change very rapidly. Is the ISW showing, well, if I can get it up, the ISW showing too much different? As always, the ISW, the radar map, I'm all over the place. Does it show too much different? Well, it definitely shows different of the red controlled to the ISW map, but not too far different from, I guess, the claimed Russian control. And if we go to then the deep state, it is showing, in my opinion, very similar, if not in some regions less controlled than the deep state. So it is interesting to have a look at. And what we're going to look at while I've got this map up is, if I can zoom in, I'm too used to clicking and zooming, in this Spurne region here. So this region, I believe, is on this map here. And what we're seeing is, where is Russia sitting? So what they're showing, if we can just line this up. So we have Mykolaiv here, Ivano-Darivka, and Spurne here. So the Russians are basically saying that there's 2-3 small reservoirs here, and they're into the second one. What we're going to do is then have a look on the deep state and look, Spurne here. So Russia's saying they control up to this second little reservoir water source here. So they're saying they're right up to here, which is not being shown on this map, although we did see between the 23rd and the 24th, so 2 days ago, that Russia did get some ground up there. But otherwise, changes on the map, not really anything dramatic. The only one that I did actually miss yesterday was in Mariinka. We saw Ukraine gain some territory. So if we step back to a couple of days back, so on the 20th, Russia had this spire out here, and then Ukraine pushed them back to this position. So they came out and then came back. But these front lines are fluid. So what we're going to do is have a look at some footage as well. And there is a lot of mud. But something about the mud to say is that the intelligence have definitely talked about that the mud may be overstated by Russia. So the intel update from the 21st, so that's a few days old, with soft ground conditions across most of Ukraine, severe mud is highly likely, slowing operations for both sides of the conflict. We've seen that. However, Russian online outlets are likely exaggerating the overall impact of mud on Ukrainian forces as part of an information operation aimed at raising Russian morale and undermining Ukraine's supporters in light of an anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive. Surface conditions can be expected to improve in the coming weeks. The threat from mines probably continues to be more of an important factor in limiting combatants' off-road manoeuvre. Now, that is very true. So we're talking about Bakhmut. Let's look at the weather. And they're in for another week of rain. So it is warming up, 21, 23, and, into the higher teens. But a lot of rain over the next coming week. Thunderstorms and a fair bit of rain. So we've looked at the weather. Now let's look at what some of the ground is actually showing. Now, I'm not saying this is in this exact area, but it's said to be around this, of a Ukrainian vehicle towing one just through these conditions. And this is the reason, in my opinion, we have not seen these offensive start, is just these conditions on the ground. And like they say, the landmines, so you're moving on the road, it's clear, but then if you start braking track going off-road, well, you never exactly know what's going on. As well as this vehicle here, which if someone could actually help me out, I believe that this is actually an Australian AS4 M113. So there's a lot of these vehicles, old American vehicle, M113 vehicle, but I believe that this is actually an Australian variant. And I'll tell you why in a second. So this is obviously a Ukrainian vehicle now, and reversing through this very deep mud here. But if we pause here, and it has 6 road wheels. Now, the original M113s only have 5. And these bins actually on the back of the vehicle here, I believe, are as well Australian. Now, I could be completely wrong in that, but you can just see these guys having a good time, but the mud bloody huge, and that is said to be over the last couple of days. As well as we have a little bit of footage here from inside Bakhmut from Russian sources over only the past 24 hours. Or at least that's what the source who released this, which is a pro-Russian source, has said. So these Russians are on the rooftop. You can hear heavy firing in the distance. You can see guys on the rooftop and then driving through these regions under heavy fire. Driving through in civilian type vehicles under heavy fire. So this is pretty extreme, right in the centre of Bakhmut, and then running into one of the buildings. So there's also been a statement from Yevgeny Prigozhin, of course, the leader of Wagner Group, but this has been released from Russian sources, and I can't actually find any other source from this. So as anything, like I say, this is from a Russian source. Take it with a grain of salt. So what it is said. He said, our task is to grind the Ukrainian army, not to give them the opportunity to assemble in a counteroffensive. We're doing this more than successfully. As soon as Bakhmut is taken, Zelensky will need the greatest victory, and for this he will launch the very counteroffensive. Today, no one bothers us to enter the operational space, because the situation around Bakhmut, within a radius of 10 kilometres, will not change after its capture. It will be exactly the same. The operational space, right up to Warsaw, is already fully open. Now, that is a very interesting statement, saying that right up to Warsaw, is fully open. Of course, Warsaw being in Poland, which is are long. Let's have a look at on the map of how long this actually is. And Prigozhin comes out with statements all the time about things like this. So this is Warsaw here. So if he really wants to go there, what are we talking? 1,000 kilometers? 1,300 kilometers. So, of course, but what he's meaning, and Zelensky somewhat backed this up when Zelensky said maybe 5 weeks ago that if they capture Bakhmut, it could be an open road into the rest of the Donbass, being Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, places like that, being where the high ground sits in this region. But what I think he's hinting at here is we're not giving them the opportunity to assemble in a counteroffensive. Now, this is what I believe, and I've been pretty outspoken on, but I believe both sides are doing in Bakhmut. Now, both sides are taking huge numbers of casualties in Bakhmut. Russia probably more because they are more on the offensive. Russia, I've heard numbers 3-1, 5-1, 7-1, but how many more guys are they willing to throw in? How many of these are conscripted prisoners? It changes. Is the one Ukraine who dies, is that an elite, Western trained good soldier compared to 7 random guys pulled out of a jail who have been conscripted across? Those are the sort of things that can matter, and especially with how we see Russian tactics. But I believe that both sides are really believing they're grinding against so much of the enemy that they're failing to launch a counteroffensive. And I believe as well, the reason Ukraine has not pulled out of Bakhmut is more so that then Wagner Group are contained in Bakhmut and won't then move down into Avdiivka and try and form a breakthrough there. As we did see, Wagner Group, as many flaws as they've got, they did make a breakthrough that the Russian army had 8-9 months sitting at Bakhmut having very little success. And they did manage to actually have, I know the cost of the success was massive, and the success is a road a day, but they are moving forward. Massive cost, but they are moving forward. And at least if Ukraine is keeping them here, they are keeping Wagner in this space, who are more highly trained, more capable soldiers than the rest of the Russian military, at least the vast majority of the Russian military. That was the concern with the VDV, the Russian paratroopers, moved on the flanks, that then more Wagner could be restaffed. But I also believe that Russia have a similar idea that, Ukraine will keep putting people in, and then it will hold further counteroffensives from there of them pushing in. So it's very difficult. But we've spoken recently really about the front lines being stagnant. That's what I've been showing you. As Russia's failed winter offensives come to an end, they are moving into a more defensive posture, while the Ukrainian forces transition from defensive posturing to these offensives and the upcoming major counteroffensives. Now, in an interview with RBC Ukraine, Ukrainian head of intelligence Kirilo Budanov has said the only places on the front line where they are making attempts are in the city of Bakhmut, an attempt to cover the city of Avdiivka from the north, and localized fighting in the city of Mariinka. Both in Avdiivka and Mariinka, the tactics are identical to those in Bakhmut, just an attempt to wipe the settlement off the face of the earth. In this interview, Budanov also says some interesting bits about some upcoming offensives and also some expectations. That is, when you say by the summer we will enter the Crimea, are you aware of the responsibility for your words? Do I understand you correctly? Look, according to the way everything should happen, everything will happen after the return of all our borders. I don't know why you focus so much on Crimea, because I can tell you directly, Crimea is part of the territory of Ukraine. The situation will not end without the return of Crimea. No one will complete it, no matter how much they want it. I emphasize Crimea because according to the assessments you gave, we should enter Crimea sometime now, by summer. That is why, in fact, attention is focused on this. Somewhere now, we have to return the entire territory. Over time, we still have time. Is Crimea final or not? If Crimea is the last to be taken, it is final. If Crimea is taken first and Donbass has not been taken yet, then this is not the end. Now, this comes amongst many doubts from Western analysts and from the media about Ukrainian upcoming offensives and how much they could actually take, how effective these will actually be. He also states that there will not be a nuclear strike if Ukraine enters Crimea. That said, this is probably only known to Putin and a few others if that would actually happen or not. I would say probably unlikely. But that said, the backlash from using a nuclear weapon, in any case, whether it be strategic or tactical, they're the terms people use, but these are just small or large nuclear weapons. The backlash would be unbelievable. And I think some of Russia's supporters, or these neutral countries, China, India, Iran, it's both neutral and supporting, it depends how you look at it, that the amount of backlash that it would be then impossible for them to actually turn a blind eye to this and maintain that neutral sort of perspective. But my question to the audience, to you guys, would be, what would the West's reaction be if Russia did actually drop a nuclear weapon on, say, advancing forces through Crimea? Now, It is known, of course, the West can flatten Russia 10 times over, but the MAD treaty, the mutually assured destruction, does show that we would be ended here as well. That MAD treaty basically is we've both got enough wet nukes that we can end ourselves 10 times over. That's why no one can fire one. The question I want to ask is, what would then the West do? Would the West increase supply to Ukraine to then further enable them to push through and win the war? Would the West strike Russia? Or would the West seek to end the war, as doomsday could really seem very close then? And remember with this, would the West seek to end the war? Well, this is how the US ended the war in the Pacific with Japan. Although the US did have the upper hand at the time. But ultimately, striking Japan with nuclear weapons saved more lives than taking those areas actually would have cost. Now, this is used as justification by the US for dropping nuclear weapons on non-military civilian targets, but it's something to take into account. Also on the nuclear thing, how would Western support look after a strike like that? Would it take a turn? Because, the support from the West now is like, well, that's a long way away. We can send money, my tax going there. Great, we're helping out Ukraine fight for freedom. But if a nuclear strike became, hey, this could hit Melbourne, Sydney, New York, LA, would they do that? Of course they're not going to do it. But, on the news, they'll put it that way that it could potentially, this conflict could cross many borders. ICBMs can go anywhere in the world. Would support then dwindle, or support go from we need to enable Ukraine to win to we need to end this war because we don't want our country involved? Remember, people, when it comes to their own safety, are very selfish. So, that's what I'm asking you. Those are sort of the four possibilities that I can think of would we strike Russia? Would we then seek the means to an end? Would Western support dry up? Or would we just be like, we need to give Ukraine everything now to roll this? So that's what I want to question you or ask you, or are there other options? But speaking of Crimea, there have been Ukrainian attacks in a Russian naval base in Sevastopol by Ukrainian drones. So let's have a look at this. And this is the footage that we have here. So we can see this explosion here. Now this has been geolocated to this position here. So as you can see, a long way from the nearest Ukrainian held territory. So then we zoom in, and this is on one of these enclaves here at one of the naval bases near Sevastopol here. This is a Russian Black Sea fleet is here. Now, we don't actually know the damage on this. So according to the local governor, which of course is Russian held area at the moment, the governor's not going to be like, you fucked us up. But according to the governor, one drone was shot down by the air defense and another exploded, which we see. And he said it didn't cause any damage, but we don't know that, and we're yet to see any satellite photos actually come out from the day. There are satellite photos floating around, but that was said to be the day before or in the days leading up. So I wanted to look at and talk about this footage here. Now, this footage is said to be from the Russians near the Antovsky Bridge in the Dacha village. Now, where is that? Well, that is exactly where we were talking about yesterday. If we zoom out, we go down to Kherson. Sorry, we're very zoomed in here. We go down Kherson, and this is where we've seen Ukraine make significant gains across the river here. And ISW say that Ukraine has formed a bridgehead here, being a significant area of tactical importance to then resupply and move. Although we haven't seen any geolocated actual photographs of an actual bridgehead or real positions formed here, not just guys jumping off boats in this region, but they have more stuff than I. But they are saying that they are in this bridge here. Is this footage of a Russian soldier firing? Now, this isn't geolocated, so it could be from anywhere. But what I found interesting was this guy shooting here, and this belt-fed backpack we see here. And you can see the rounds feeding down around to this machine gun here. Now, I don't know what he's firing at, but you can see him firing across the water here. Now, this is a very interesting setup. Now, I've seen some things like this, but from what I know, there was very bad on getting stoppages, and if you had like an ammunition stoppage, then it was very difficult to clear. But I do think that this is very interesting bit of kit here. So we see this feed into here. So, backpack full of bullets and that. So it's just interesting. It's a bit of kit that I have not seen actually used so far in this war. So I thought that was just a cool bit of footage. From this, in Kherson, now in Crimea with these attacks, Ukraine is having success further behind the front line. And this is going to be absolutely crucial if there is hope for these successful counteroffensives, because at the end of the day, they need to, you need to fight the guys on the front line, but you also need to hit the logistic support, areas of important tactical locations behind the front line. And I believe as well, one of the big things that is not being spoken about a lot, I think people are focusing so much on things like fighter jets and tanks and whatever. One of the big ones that I would be pushing for if I was, sitting in Ukraine, in the bloody Parliament House, is we need the ability to strike within Russia. Now, I know they're saying it, but that would be absolute top of my priority, because at the end of the day, where Ukraine is limited to by Western weapons is within their own border. They can't hit in Russia. Now, I know the problems with this. I know the escalation. I know these things. But at the end of the day, if Russia set a logistics center somewhere out here, it is fairly secure. Now, yes, we have seen Ukrainian troops pro-Ukrainian Russian-aligned troops, so like anti-Putin guys in Russia. We've seen Ukraine launch older Soviet drones into Russia, and a number of surprise attacks from civilian partisans, things like that within Russia. But as far as using things like HIMARS, using long-range rockets, we're not seeing that at all in here. So those things are fairly safe as long as they sit in their own territory. I believe successful counteroffensives, especially once Ukraine is clearing area closer to the Russian border, that idea of striking things in Russia with the West is going to have to change for this to be more successful. But legends, I hope this wasn't too long of ones. I hope you're doing really well. Now, if you want to support me, there's links below. I love your support. You help me out a lot. So look after yourselves. Have a great Anzac Day. Have a think about the way people have shaped this nation to be a great nation like it is, and shaped wherever you are as well. That the freedoms we enjoy are because, like I said very early in this, the men gave their tomorrow for your today. So thank you to those men. I can't wait to have a beer and think about that as well. So look after yourselves, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.